having trouble racist. If you're having trouble sleeping, sleeping is now racist. Apparently, a lack of sleep or sleep deprivation is racist. So you all can throw in your comments and thoughts about that. If you get a chance, you can look it up. There was an article that came out that basically said that people who lack sleep, it's oftentimes disproportionate to people of color because of systemic racism, and that's why sleep is racist. Something along those lines. I can't even, to be honest with you, I read it and can't make it make sense. Like I tried, like, you know.
It don't make sense. You got to think about it this way, man. Like at this point, like they reach, like they're basically running out of things to say they're racist. You're running out of proof of this idea that every single thing you run into is systemically trying to hold someone down. Okay? It's called, there's actually a word for it. It's called intersectionalism. I think that's the way you pronounce it. Intersectionalism. And it's basically a witch hunt. It's a never-ending witch hunt. If we were in a perfect world and there was nothing wrong and everybody was equal and everyone treated everybody nicely and there's no poverty and no death and blah, 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 they would find something to complain about. All of a sudden it'd be like not enough people are dying, you know, proportionally to the yellow and the blue and all the other people in the world. And it's called intersectionalism. There's a good article about it. I'll find it. I used it for a school paper when I was still studying. And it basically it was used in the article was talking about the church. It was basically saying that intersectionalism is like this new type of religion where there's a belief in there's always something wrong. There's always someone to blame. There's always someone to be held accountable, no matter how good it is. And you see that nowadays because we're reaching so far back into history that we're just trying to hold everybody accountable today for shit that nobody was even alive for. You know. And it's real easy to pick on American like slavery and stuff like that, but there's so many other little movements that are going on in the world and the country. It's just ridiculous. People are just looking for something to be. They just want to hop online. They want to be a social justice warrior and make them feel good about themselves, and they want to make videos and cry and shit. Everybody just needs.
Well, here's the thing. So here's my thing, right? To give to look at that from like try to be objective in it, and the people who are on the social justice, you know, trains and all of that, like I get it. Like, don't get me wrong. I do understand, and I think you understand as well. There are social issues that exist for sure. There are cultural issues that exist, and so for anybody who is passionate about these things, I'm not discrediting or invalidating your. We're not here to invalidate your passion or whatever, you know, cause that you believe is deemed, you know, necessary. However, in that passion, there needs to be a limitation on what is true and what is not true. There needs to be an understanding that some of this stuff, some of y'all are reaching so far, it's worse than yoga. You know what I'm saying? Like when, you know, you have that sleep deprivation is racist. You know, when you have that, what was the other one? I told you that daylight savings time is apparently racist. You know, and daylight savings time disproportionately affects people of color, and it's like, no, daylight savings time everybody the same. You all lose an hour and gain an hour.
I'm gonna have to see.
And the way it was framed was like, oh, because they live in worse situations and da-da-da. And what's interesting, when we hear this kind of stuff, it's like, well, here's the thing. Like, people of color and people of non-color, however you want to call that, there are people who live in those situations who are on both sides of the spectrum, who are non-color, color, whatever. And I think we try so hard to make it somebody's fault in so many ways. You know, we try. It's like at the end of the day, okay, let's acknowledge that these issues are real in this situation, but we don't need to try to make more issues by reaching and grabbing a hold of all these different things and making it, you know, fit into everything can't fit into the narrative. Everything is not racist. Everybody's not racist. Like, that's a fact, you know what I'm saying? And the thing about it is, and I tell you this, and people used to get on me all the time as they talk about, oh, that's because you ain't never, you know, experienced no real racism and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. You never experienced it, so you don't know. Well, I have. I have experienced real racism, like straight up in your face. Like I've been face to face with I went to a motel in a particular state and they told us we could not get a room, and then turned around and gave another family who was not of my color a room. Like, I've seen it with my own eyes, but that doesn't.
Would you have to say, but you go back to that specific incident, would you sit there and argue that that entire city you were in is systemically racist, or would you say more along the lines of just that business was racist? Did you experience that at other businesses in that city?
So like I look at it, okay, here we go. Intersectionality and acknowledging systemic issues isn't about blaming, it is about uncovering the foundations of things. I get it. I can see that. I mean, I do think so, and thank you for that comment, by the way. Like, I can see that. I think that, so for me, I think that history is, okay, two things. I'm reading the comment and answering your question. All right. Yeah, in my situation, when I was in that motel, the reality is this. I think that I look at it from an individual basis. I refuse to allow myself to broad brush across, all spectrums to say that, okay, because these people treated me this way, then it must apply to all these people. I mean, I just personally can't do that. I choose not to do that. I mean, because just as much as I've had people who may have been of the lighter complexion, who are clear, Caucasian, whatever you want to call it, I have had light-skinned people treat me. I've had light-skinned people treat me not cool, and it was because of my color. But I've also had people of my color treat me bad because of my color. You know what I mean? And so, but I choose not to approach. I don't take an approach where I say, yo, well, clearly all of these people are like this because of this. No, I don't do that. I personally take things on an individual basis. But I can understand it can be difficult if you see a history of this particular group doing X, Y, and Z. Then yes, I understand that it can be looked at like, well, I remember having a conversation with a guy. He was lighter skinned, and he was saying how he was like, man, I don't even know what to do, because he was like, if I say I'm not racist, I feel like I'm like constantly having to prove it. And then if I don't necessarily have people of color in my friend group, then I'm looked at as though I'm clearly racist because I don't have any, black or brown associates or friends. But then when I do have black or brown associates or friends, I'm looked at as either I just got these folks as like my tokens just to prove that I'm not racist, or I'm hanging out with them because I'm trying to be like them, or I'm trying to be black and brown, you know what I'm saying? Or it's a matter.
It's like going around saying I'm
right,
not racist.
I'm saying, I'm not racist, I have a black friend, exactly. But it's like there's no winning. Like at the end of the day, it's like I as a person who is white, it's like you can't win in many aspects when it comes to racism or when it comes to these things. And like I said, people look at it from a historical perspective. They look at all these things. But when you get down to the weeds of it, the reality is that prejudice, which is really what it is more than anything, like, because they changed the definition of racism. Racism used to be one race deemed itself more superior than another race, right? And so that for sure exists. There are people but I also know there are black supremacists as well who believe that black people are better than any other race. I know there's people who are Asian supremacists. You don't hear it, but it exists, where they do believe that the Asian race is better than everybody else. So the supremacy thing has existed for a long time. But if you think about it, like now it's become, we've mixed prejudice, we've mixed, discriminate, we've mixed all of these things into one blanket of racism. And then, you get to the genetic aspect, that scientifically, there is only one race genetically. There's one race of people, and we have different ethnicities within that race. But that's a whole other conversation, because then, you get into all that kind of stuff. I just think that we should acknowledge these issues. I do think we should acknowledge if there is a system, or if there is a building or the company or whatever that is racist in nature. If you show me a racist, absolutely, I feel like we should do something about that. If you show me somebody who's treating someone differently because of their race, creed, sexuality, all that stuff, hey, I'm off. Let's handle that. You know what I'm saying? However, in a situation where you're saying that something is racist without you even knowing that it's racist, beyond the fact that the racism is in the back of your mind and you don't even know that you're racist because the race, it's like it becomes
Well, I think it's become such a
right,
card to pull in modern society, especially today. And the thing is, you could sit here and say like, oh well, it's mostly black people that always pull out
right,
the race card. It's simply
right,
not true. White people do it all the time too. They'll say, oh well, just because I'm white, I don't get this and I don't blah. I mean,
right.
it's become almost a crutch for people to lean on. And because of the broad stroking,
I
I really
agree.
think it causes more problems than it does to
Right,
help solve anything that's going on. You're not going to solve a town or a city being racist by just saying everybody in that town is racist. Because nine times, I guarantee, especially nowadays,
right,
that's probably not true. Now, you're people who are probably a little bit older, and I could probably guess where you were with three guesses, but
right,
that's the way it was. There's people that were still alive during the most
right,
racist period of our history. Now
right,
I can't say the most racist because there's
right,
slavery, but one of the most racist periods in our history, one of the most
right,
divided periods in our
right,
history. People are still alive from that. I don't think we're honestly. I don't think we're really going to start to move on. And I'm going to say this until a lot of those people die off, because we're still living, like we're still looking at
right,
that, and you're still teaching people, from a
right,
firsthand experience what they used to do. I don't know, shit,
right,
70 years ago at this point. And so until that generation kind of one either dies off, or two, we get them out of these
right,
elected positions, because this goes back to a whole, if you want to talk about a systemic issue, the same people that were in Congress 30, 40 years ago
that's
are the same people
crazy.
that are still there. So everything that we talk about, all these issues and these bills and these laws that we have a problem with, the
Yeah,
same people are still in office. People have been voting for the
yeah.
same people for
What
50
is
years, 40
and what is the
years.
definition of
They're still
insane?
there.
Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I mean, when you
So a lot of people want to sit here and talk about how, the Democrats are this, or
right,
because, we're very
right,
polarized with our two parties right now. Very, very polarized. And Republicans are this. And you spend more time defending your position being a Republican, or defending your position being a Democrat, saying, well, it wasn't always like this, or this isn't the real party.
right,
This is how they really feel. And at the end of the day, they're two birds. They're
right.
one bird, two wings of one bird, right? It's the same people that have been working
Mm-hmm.
together for all this time, over the same issues. If you look at any major issue that we've had in this country, and they said, well, if we had more people in Congress or more people in the Senate, or if we had this type of president, then everything would be different. Well, what about all the times that we had a completely one-sided? You had a Republican president with Republican Senate, Republican majority across the board. Nothing
Right.
changed. Nothing major changed. Same thing
Well,
with
you had
Trump.
that. You had that up until
I bring up
recently. You had that
I
now.
bring up
You
Israel.
had, a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate. Just recently they lost the House, but I mean, you had a full. I mean, they won everything, and then and you look at our country, and we have some issues. You know what I mean? And so the reality, and you made that
Mm-hmm.
comment about the two wings on the same bird. I thought about it. Is I think, yes, you're correct. For a very long time, it was two wings of the same bird. I think now the wings have become so out of sync now, because they're trying to pull away from each other almost, and that the bird is spiraling out of control.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think, like I said this. I think we talked about this last week or whatever. And I said I think that the the government as we have once known it, I think those days are either ending or coming to an end. I think that so much has been exposed in the last couple of years. So many agendas have been pushed. So much ideology has been pushed a little bit too much, too fast, that I think the people have now just gotten completely. I just have no interest in the government anymore. You know what I mean? Like I'm like you. They have record people not
Yeah.
voting. You have people going third parties. You have more people voting for third parties than they've ever voted for, like ever. You know what I mean? And now,
It's
right,
change is going to
right,
come, but change is going to come really slowly until you can convince. So, you go back to the last presidential election. We don't, everyone's like, we had two shitty candidates and we picked the one that
right,
we felt was going to be better for the country. Cool. That's great. It
right,
shouldn't be like that. That's how you feel. There
right,
wasn't only two shitty candidates. There was two main
right,
candidates that got to debate, but then you had other good candidates. Like I voted 100% for Jo Jorgensen, Dr. Jo Jorgensen. She's a woman. She was the only candidate that didn't have any sexual assault charges. She wants to basically leave everybody alone, lower taxes for
right,
everybody, basically let you do what you want, you know, to an extent. and take big government out of
she's a libertarian,
out of your small areas. We look back the way you look back at the country was set up for each individual state to govern themselves with a weaker centralized government that was mostly there for infrastructure and national defense. And the federal government, if you look back all the way to around the Civil War period, that's when you started seeing the federal government start to take more power, okay? Once the Union defeated the Confederacy, all that power that they took to save the Union, they never gave it back. You fast forward to World War II, all the things that they did, all the power that they took, they never gave it back. Everything that they passed is still in place today. They were like, oh, this is just until we get through the war. This is just until we get through this time period, until we get through the Great Depression. Yeah. And they still have all that power. That's why, that's why our drinking age is 21. Our drinking age is 21 because all the states got together and said this was a good idea. The states got together. The states, what you're explaining as part of systemic racism government isn't the only part. What you are missing is the effects of it. It doesn't become undone with people dying. I mean, yeah, that's true. But what I'm saying, what I was trying to explain back then is that you still have a firsthand account of those time periods and people still continuing to teach those thought processes to the people below them from a firsthand account. Reading stuff out of a book is way different than having somebody who actually lived an experience teach it to you. Same thing if you sit down and talk to a World War II vet. Talking to someone who landed on the beaches of Okinawa is way different than reading their memoirs in the book. That's what I was trying to get the message. That was the point I was trying to make with
attacking your mindset. And I got you, like attacking the mindset, right?
Yeah. So there's a good movie that shows exactly what that is. It's called Apt Pupil. So it's about this. It's called Apt Pupil. I think that's what it's called, Apt Pupil. But it's basically it's this white kid. He goes to his old man's house. He starts helping him around the house, and he discovers that he used to be a Nazi. Now, in the beginning, this dude doesn't say anything about being he actually part of the Nazi Party in World War II. Doesn't say anything about it. He's hiding. But then as the kid starts to discover and starts to become more, involved, he starts letting a little bit out, like seeping into his mind all these ideas and these ideologies on, that belief. And he's so young, he's so impressionable. It's when you watch the movie and you see the change come over him, that I think is powerful. It's very powerful to see how, and it goes back to other talks that we've had about how you can take an ideology and you basically just feed it a little bit at a time until it's no longer yours. Now it's ours. Yeah. Now you're believing what I'm believing, and stuff and things like that. But then anyway, going back to weak centralized government, the federal government hasn't given back any of the power that it's taken. Like if you look back to what was I talking? Oh, the drinking age. I mean, we can debate on who's an adult, who's not an adult all day long. But what happened is the federal government basically told these states are like, hey, if you don't raise the legal drinking age to 21, we're not going to give you federal funding for your roads, for your this, for that. So they basically they strong arm them into federal policies, and you see a lot of that today. You see the federal government really tries to lean on individual states. You see individual states here and there stand up. Florida kind of told the government to fuck off during COVID. Montana and other places like that, they're just tired of it. States are getting tired of the federal government telling them what they can and cannot do. Now, when it comes to bigger issues, issues that need to be federally handled, like you go back to, we can say the civil rights. Obviously, the federal government needed to step in. There was something that was inherently and morally wrong, and the federal government needed to step in, But at the end of the day, the states are supposed to govern themselves. That's the way it should be. The laws are going to change from state to state. We have little laws that change from state to state. I don't know. You can name a couple here and a couple there. I don't know a ton off the top of my head. I spent most of my life in Louisiana, so I know their laws. Drinking, in New Orleans, you drink all day, 24 hours a day, any gas station. But I got a station in North Carolina, and they call last call at 2:00. What is last call? What do you mean? You stop serving alcohol in your whole state at 2:00? You mean we can't go to the gas station? I mean, completely shut down across the state, and stuff like that. And that's the federal government, But now, if North Carolina wants to do that, That's fine.
Right.
That's their state. If
No,
that's what they decide on, they voted on,
yeah, no, I agree with
and
you. I
things like
think
that.
that one of the biggest challenges that we have, one of the mistakes that we have made is we took the power out of the states and gave it to the federal government. You know what I mean? I think that was the biggest mistake. And that's one of the biggest deviations from the original establishment of the country in the first place. You know, when we began to give federal power to the federal government, even though we are state people, you know what I mean? We are people living in states. We gave an overarching umbrella power and took it away from the states. Yeah, things have changed very drastically. And I think, you know, and I tell people all the time, I say that the reason that our country looks the way that it does is because we gave the power away. You know,
Yeah,
you want to know the cause of
100%.
our current disposition, it couldn't be any clearer. Look in the mirror. You know what I mean? I think that we as the people we alleviated our responsibility and we said, no, yeah, you guys know better than us. Here you go. Even though back in the day it was very clearly understood that you put your pants on the same way I do. But unfortunately, because of fear, convenience, culture, money, whatever the case is, we decided that the government knew better. We decided that they're more responsible than we are, and they have the power. And obviously, I think some of this stuff was also circumstance. Obviously, to the war. I mean, think about it. You look at something like income tax. You know what I mean? Like, you know, that was implemented to fund the war. You know what I mean? And it made perfect sense at the time. It's like, yes, we need funding for the war, so we're gonna have to tax a little bit so we can fund the war and keep our troops safe and keep weapons going and keep production up and all that stuff. But then the war ended, and income tax didn't. You know what I mean?
They kept it
But
because
you
they
got so
realized
used to it,
it was a
it's
huge,
just like, oh,
revenue
okay,
curve.
well, we need to keep this for this and for infrastructure and for this and for this. So it just makes sense. And now all we did was add more taxes, and we always attach this ideology that makes sense to go along with it, which will cause people to kind of be much more. And what do? We complain and we say, oh, man, doggone taxes. But guess what? You gonna pay them
Yeah,
bucks. You know what I'm saying? Because guess what? IRS
damn
put
right.
knocking at your door. Because see, now it's shifted from being a voluntary uh, tithe, for lack of better words, to go toward the betterment of the nation, the protection of the country, to now it's become
No.
an obligation, you know what I'm saying, under the rule of law. And see, when stuff switches like that,
Yeah.
that's when you get into very dangerous territory, you know. So, right,
And they got you. They have you fooled when it comes to things like that, you know. And the income tax is a very good thing to talk about because we sit here and you will have the middle class and the you know, lower than the middle class, poor people, people who don't make
right,
whatever they say people in the middle
right,
class make. I don't even know. I think the numbers shift every year. But you have the class system now. You have the middle class. And the
right,
middle class basically just means you get by. That's what being in the middle class is. You're not rich, you're not poor. You get by, and you decent levels of comfort, I
right,
guess, throughout there, depending on how you live your lifestyle, what you
right,
spend your money on, what you save, invest, so forth and so on. Well, they've got you convinced that like
right,
the rich are the problem. All right, they have
right,
you convinced that the rich are the problem. That's like 1%. That's like 1% of the country. You know what I'm saying? That's 1% of the country. Okay, and then you have the middle class that pays the
right,
majority of all the taxes, and that's why you have the middle class get so torn between like they want to be conservative, they want to help people out, but they're getting taxed to a point where when you look at your paycheck and you see
yeah,
how much money they take out for taxes, and then you look at spending bills like this bill, I think I don't know if they just passed it or they're still talking about it. They want if you actually go and read the bill, there's so many ridiculous things in that bill that they
right,
want to spend it's our money. That's our
right,
money. It's our taxpayer money that they want to spend on all these programs for I think they want to spend like a few million
right,
dollars to rename a road after Nancy Pelosi. Was one of the things that I saw was highlighted in one of them. In a previous bill I had read, they wanted $10 million for one
right,
senator's personal library. You know what I'm saying? Like that's your
right,
taxpayer money that they're funding their lives with. Let's talk about the war in Ukraine. Over $100 billion. We didn't spend $100 billion in 1 year in
right.
either Iraq or Afghanistan during the height of the war. Yeah, we spent that much money sending, and then people are like, oh, it's for freedom.
Well,
We can have a whole
on
show on why
yeah, the
we
cost of
shouldn't have
freedom.
anything to do with Ukraine. Okay,
Yeah,
but the cost of freedom. Look, we've been funding NATO for the last 70 years. Call us when they get to Paris, and we'll consider it a problem. You guys take care of it. Okay, you got all of our money, all of our weapons, all of our
right,
tanks. Call us if you need us. Okay,
right,
that's how I feel about that. But we're sitting here, and you basically have Americans fighting Americans. And I think I said this before. If you have a white billionaire, a black billionaire, a Hispanic billionaire, and an Asian billionaire sit down, you think they care about race? You think billionaires care about race? Racism is a poor people problem. Racism is for the middle class down. We're the ones that worry about
that.
Racism. We're the ones
That would be that's a whole other conversation. Racism is a poor people problem. Yeah, I mean, it's funny.
Yeah.
It just reminds me of and I said this I think last week about that whole ant analogy. The red and black ants in the jar. When you have red and black ants in the jar minding their business, they won't fight or any of that stuff. But when you shake the jar, all of a sudden they'll start to kill each other. And when you think about it, that represents us. And you look at it from a perspective of like, dang, the real issue is who's shaking the jar. Where's this, ideas and narrative coming from? And it's not saying that history doesn't exist, but I think we can learn a lot from just animals, because they don't care. They just exist within their frame and do what they do and in their tribes, and they're not worried about that. The only animals that have any history of anything close to racism is dolphins. You know what I mean? Like, do you know that? Yeah, doggone dolphins.
It's the damn dolphins.
Man. So dolphins, apparently, this is just random thought. Dolphins apparently kill porpoise whales just because. Like, literally, or spotted. They kill spotted dolphins, and I think porpoise whales or whatever, something like that. They randomly kill them. They'll like take a group and go out, go find them, and just kill a bunch of them. Just cause. Like, they don't eat them or nothing. And people have argued that it's because of the way they look. That people argue it's because it's crazy because they're apparently cousins of dolphins, and like apparently because they're short nosed and they're spotted or whatever. Like I said, I'm not a biologist, but apparently they do that on purpose. Like they purposely go out and try to kill the.
Like they say, octopuses will sometimes.
Yeah, just for no reason. You're in my way.
Yeah,
because I don't like the way your scales are.
There's some things I think you just have to. It just happens. Like sometimes maybe that octopus is having a bad day and you can take it out on the fish. I don't think it has to do with the fact that.
Yeah, but I think on that, man. I mean, I think that's a great example of something we should actually take into consideration of adopting in society. Like, if everybody just mind their own business, we just chilling. You do your thing, I do my thing. You need a hand, you need a hand. You see all the time these random videos of like a bison flipping over a turtle. They got flipped over. You know what I mean? You see I saw like a bear helping like a bird or something like that. Like if we just adopted some of these more primitive mindsets of like, it doesn't matter any of that stuff. I'm just here to do what I got to do. We live, you operate in your world, I operate in my world. The only difference is we shouldn't eat each other. You know what I mean? But then again,
I'm not taking anything
right,
off the table at this point. You know what I'm saying? We are about apparently we're about
to and that's so crazy, so, bro. I find it so interesting that like the things that are in the news, we talk about stuff like, they just passed the Tiger King law. Yeah. So the Tiger King law basically says they have banned the raising of big cats and ownership of big cats like Tiger King. Literally, that's a real thing. Like the show Tiger King, they made the law the Tiger King law,
I've seen the show.
and basically saying they banned the raising and the owning of big cats like that. So in the style and manner in which they did it, so it was like, oh, okay, cool. And you hear, and I see articles about, like I saw an article about like Kim Kardashian felt like she didn't know what was going on when she visited the White House. And then I read all these different articles and these headlines and stuff. And I think about, but yet nobody's reporting on like, we only got one story for like 2 days about the 13 food supply, what do you call it? They got arsoned. You know what I mean? In like a year.
It's more than 13. It's like 90. If you go look it up, since January, it's been like 90 food processing plants. They found 10,000 cows.
Yeah, I mean, I saw the cows. It's like, that's the kind of stuff that I think we need to be paying attention to. When you have food processing plants that are getting blown up very randomly, when you have cows that are randomly just dying, when you have What was the other thing I looked at the other day? And like nobody even really cares that deeply about the nuclear fission that they achieved recently in California. Like that's not one of the greatest leaps in human
Yeah.
history. You know what I mean? Like we haven't seen this in human history.
Yeah. Well, how about the drug? The drug that just came out, I think it was 2 weeks ago, had a 100% success rate in
Wow.
getting rid of colon
I didn't
cancer.
even hear about it. Like,
100% success rate. I forgot what the name of the company was because I was going to go buy stock in it, but it's like $2,000 a share, and
right.
I ain't that rich. So,